Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be planting out some Paulownia seeds. Now Paulownia is one of the fastest growing trees in the world. It's often used commercially for biomass or for very rapid timber production. It's also used in an ornamental setting as well because the leaves are really large and they look very tropical, and also it has some nice purple flowers as well. So there's several different types of Paulownia. The most common one is Paulownia fortunei, or at least that's the one in my climate that's most common because it's a bit more hardy. And it's one we tend to see around the UK. Now I have seen these growing in Scotland, but they've never grown very well. I only know of 2 or 3 plants that I've seen anyway in Scotland. I've seen a lot in Europe and they grow really well in Europe where they have warmer summers. In Scotland I think the summers are a little bit cool. There's a couple that I've seen. One was in the Edinburgh Botanic Gardens. It was a small tree but it was in a rather shaded spot, and so it never grew particularly fast. And the other one was in someone's garden, and it only grew about 10 centimeters every year, but that was because it was in the wrong soil and it wasn't looked after properly. But I'm hoping to get mine to grow to about 2 meters every year, maybe 3 meters every year, but the idea is I'll be cutting it down to the ground and letting it grow back up. So I'm going to be starting this from seed. The seeds are exceptionally small, so it actually does take a while to get the plant going. Because the seeds are so small, you start off with a very small little plant at the beginning of the year. So you can see these are the seeds here. They're basically transported by wind, so they have to be very small to be transported by the wind, and they've got these little kind of wings on them to get them blown around. I'm going to be sowing this from seed. Now I could just have bought a normal Paulownia fortunei, but the growth wouldn't be as rapid as if I got one of the new hybrids. And because they're the fastest growing tree in the world, there's a lot of research from lots of different scientists around the world trying to get them to grow even faster. And what they've done is they've crossed between 3 different species, and this is one of the hybrids that they've come up with, which looks like it's probably the fastest growing tree in the world now. So this variety is called Paulownia Paultong, and the spelling of Paulownia is just a little bit unusual because it's from Lithuania, but this is Paultong hybrid. This hybrid has some really rapid growth. It's also one of the hardiest hybrids. This can handle down to -33 in winter, so this should be slightly better suited to my climate. Because it's going to grow a little bit slower here in North Scotland, I'll get the most vigorous, strongest hybrid I can get, just try and offset some of that slower growth rate that I'm going to have. So this Paultong variety, as I say, is supposed to be extremely rapid in growth. If grown in a commercial setting in a climate more favourable, such as France or Spain, it should grow 4 meters in the first year, and within 3 or 4 years it should be able to get up to 14 meters in height. So it's very fast growing. As I say, it's not going to grow that fast here in Scotland. But what you can do with Paulownias is if you leave them unpruned, they grow very fast, and then probably about 2 meters a year or so, and what they'll do is produce lovely purple flowers in spring. But what most people do with the Paulownias, because they do get a bit too big for a garden, is they cut them down every year. That actually makes the plant go into shock, and instead of flowering, it just puts all its growth into leaves and stems, and you get this really rapid growth. I'll show you some photos now of when I was in Germany a few years ago. It was October, so it was right at the end of the growing season, so you can see how much they've grown in 1 year. And these trees were actually cut down to the ground level, and that's how much growth they're putting in 1 year. And as a reference, I'm just under 2 meters tall when I've got shoes on, so you can see there the plant's several times higher than me, so it's put on a huge amount of growth in one growing season. And as you can see from those photos, the leaves are also massive, they're about the size of dustbin lids, so it'll give a really nice tropical appearance to my garden, really big rapid growth, and then at the end of the summer I can just cut it down and leave it as bare ground over winter, ready for next spring when it's going to grow up rapidly again. So these, as I say, will start as very small seedlings. First year I'll let it grow. It'll probably only grow to about 5 foot tall, maybe a meter and a half, 2 meters if I'm lucky. And then I'll let it grow probably a second year unpruned. It'll maybe get up to 3 or 4 meters in my climate, and then I can cut it down. The reason I need to let it grow for those few years is to get its root established. Once it's got a good root system, then it'll have the energy to do that rapid growth phase when I coppice it. So when I cut it down, it'll then probably grow 2 to 4 meters in one growing season. It won't grow to 6 to 8 meters as it can do in the more tropical climates, but I'm hoping for maybe 2 meters in mine. So this is a tree, as I say, I've never really seen any in this part of Scotland, and the ones I have seen in further south in Scotland haven't done great, but with this hybrid I'm hoping for some slightly better growth. Also I'm going to give it the best growing conditions I can, give it a sunny location, really rich soil. That should help it out. If you want to grow these plants at home, you don't probably need the most vigorous hybrid. You can probably just go for a normal Paulownia fortunei instead of the Paultong hybrid. But if you're in somewhere like America or somewhere with quite hot summers, they're not the best trees because they can get really vigorous and fast growing. And in some parts of the world, they have naturalized and they fertilize their seeds quite well, and then the seeds can spread everywhere and they can become a bit of a nuisance. Here in Scotland there's none around, so it's not going to get pollinated, and to be honest I'll be coppicing mine so it will never set seed. But in some parts of the world they are known as invasive species, so just have a look in your area if they're allowed to be grown or not. So what I'm going to do is sow the seeds. They're, as I say, they're very small and they need a particular type of germination strategy to get them going. The thing with Paulownia seeds, because they're so small, they have very little energy stored in those seeds. So what happens in the wild is this comes from a place where it has tropical monsoon type climate, so lots of rain over the summer. These seeds would land on the surface of the soil. Because they're so small, if they were to be buried by compost, they probably don't have the energy to grow up through the soil and through the compost, so they need to really be on the surface. But if they dry out at all whilst they're germinating, they're just going to die. But in the nature environment, tropical monsoon, it rains almost every single day in the summer, so they're constantly damp, and sitting on the surface isn't a problem. They're not going to dry out with all the rain that they get. So what I need to do is sow this on the surface. These are seeds that need light to germinate. If I cover them, they won't actually germinate. They need the daylight. They need to detect that light in order to germinate. So what I'm going to do is I've got a container here which I can then cover up with a lid or some cling film and keep it nice and humid, but also let the light in. I'm just going to sow these seeds on the surface. This is just some multi-purpose compost, but slightly low in feed. I don't want it too high in feed, it will burn the roots. Just going to scatter the seeds on the surface. Put this in a really bright location because it's the seeds detecting the light levels that get them to germinate. I need to keep it around 25 to 30 degrees. That's the temperature that these normally grow at in the wild environment. And these are actually quite rapidly germinating seeds, so although you need to be a bit careful with the germination with having them on the surface and with light levels and quite high temperatures, the germination should be quite rapid. It's often the fact with smaller seeds that the germination is just a little bit faster than with larger seeds. They're actually supposed to also have good germination success rate as well as being fast, so I should get most of these to germinate. There's a little certificate that came with the seeds that said that they were collected last summer, and it had a germination rate of 91% in January, which was only a month ago. So I'm just going to scatter them on the surface, not too thickly because I'm expecting them to germinate quite quick. I've got 50 seeds in total. I only need one plant, but I'll probably grow 2 or 3, and I might give some to some friends or maybe to my parents' garden. And I've also got several more in the packet, so as you can see there, that's a good number already sowed. I've still got probably at least, well, it said there was 50 in the packet, but I feel like there could actually be more than 50, so I can always sow some more later if these don't succeed. So what I'm going to do now is cover these up. I can't really put them in my propagators because all my propagators are away from windowsills, so there's not enough light. So what I'm going to do is either get a grow lamp and put them in a propagator, or I've got a grow box which is quite warm and has a very high light intensity. I might put them in there, and that will get the intense light and also the heat at the same time. So I'll see you guys in a week or two when these have started to germinate, and we'll see what the success rate is like. So it's now 3 weeks later, and as you can see the germination rate has been pretty good. I would say it's probably about 90%, so it does look like pretty much every single seed that I've sown has germinated. There's not many in here that I don't think haven't. The germination took about a week. I had them in a propagator for about 3 days, and then I put them into my heated grow box, which was about 25-30 degrees during the day and about 20 degrees at night, with high light intensities for 8 hours during the day. They started germinating after about 7 days, and then after that first seed came up, then the rest of them all germinated within 1 week. So within 2 weeks, any that were going to germinate pretty much germinated. I don't think there's been too much germination since that first 2 week period. In the last week, this one little one down here has just started to germinate, but apart from that, everything was done in the first 2 weeks. So the germination rate has been quite good. As expected, the seedlings are very small, but they've already grown quite well. Most of these now are 2 weeks old, and when they first came up, the seeds were about the size of this one down here. And as you can see, this one is now about 2 weeks old and it's much bigger already. So the growth should be exponential. As I said before, the seeds are very small, so there's not much energy in them to get going. So they produce very small plants to begin with. But once the leaves start getting bigger and bigger, they'll get more area to photosynthesize with, and the plant will just grow exponentially. So these are quite small now. I suspect in the next month they'll probably double or triple in size, and then as they get bigger, they'll really put on some rapid growth. So I'll give you guys an update in probably a few months' time, in summertime, when I'll probably be planting them out as young plants into my garden. I suspect there should be decent size, but then hopefully a foot tall or so. They'll probably grow to about half a foot in about 2 months, and then they'll just get that 2 foot height in 1 month after that. So as I say, it's exponential growth. The bigger they are, the faster they grow. They keep doubling, well, they should at least keep doubling in size at a given time period. I'm not sure what that time period is. At the moment, that time period appears to be 1 week. I don't think they'll be that rapidly growing, but they might keep doubling every week. We'll find out. But that's all for this update, and I'll see you guys in a few months' time, and we'll see what the results are like.